Hi, I'm Sarah Adams. So I am a principal planner with the Central Massachusetts Regional Planning Commission, and I focus in energy and facilities management projects. I'm relatively new there, and I'm coming from about 5.5 years of energy experience in the private sector at a small scale energy producer, a hydropower firm, and then at a consulting firm, Ty and Bond, out here in Westfield. So I have a lot of energy experience, both private and public. I'm also on the board for NUI. So Teresa actually did a really good job explaining what this series is about. But NUI is a professional organization that aims to support women in the energy and environmental fields, which are still about 70% male. So it's really, really vital that we get out and do programming like this, where we're speaking with students, we're speaking with young women who are trying to figure out how to get a foothold in these industries. And so that you can see what different careers are available to you and how you break into those fields. And just for your reference, my educational background is I went to UMass for undergrad and grad, and I have a bachelor's in sustainable community design and a master's in regional planning.
My name is Deanna Sassarosi. I work for Eversource Energy, which I imagine most of you have heard of. I'm an associate environmental specialist, so I support environmental permitting with regards to wetlands and endangered species on transmission, distribution, vegetation management, electric vehicle charging stations, pretty much any work that Eversource does that could impact the environment. I went to NC State University. I'm from North Carolina originally. I studied natural resources, and I recently started a part-time online grad program through UConn. The title is Master of Energy and Environmental Management.
I'm Patty Kuklowski. I work for First Light. We're a hydro generation facility. We have facilities in Massachusetts and in Connecticut. The same around for us is that we're the biggest hydroelectric facility in New England, or company that nobody knows about. So I am their environmental health and safety manager for the entire company. My background, I am actually a chemical engineer that ended up by accident in the environmental health and safety field. New to the electrical or the utility industry or the energy industry. I've only been with First Light for a year. I've worked as an EH&S manager or specialist or in the EH&S field for 27 years now. That tells you how old I am. And I'm a UMass grad from the chemical engineering department. So,
Great, thank you. So, would you share with us, how did you get into this field? And not say the specific job you're in, but I think often it's like, well, how am I going to take these things I care about and turn them into something that looks like a career? And then what do you love about what you're doing now? So that bridge is like, how'd you come to this? And then what do you love about what you do? Do you want to start?
No, yeah, start out.
okay, I'll start. Like I said, I ended up in the field of EHS purely by accident. All right, graduated from UMass. It was a downturn of the economy. Chemical companies, petroleum companies were not hiring when I graduated, but a consulting firm did hire me, and it hired me doing environmental work. I started reviewing out in Illinois for this consulting firm, the state implementation plans for the air permitting and summarizing it in a software system for them, and that's what got me into the field. So a lot of times what you originally plan is not what you end up doing. You never know what the situation is at that moment and what that first opportunity will turn for you. I love the field. I don't regret staying in it for the 20 plus years or 25 plus years I've been in it. One of the biggest or positive things or things that I love about my position is that I get to work with the folks on the floor. I get to work with, I've been in the chemical and the plastic industry in this field, and now in the energy industry, and is one of the most rewarding things of being able to work with people that are doing the actual work that I call making a product, making sure there's energy out there, making sure there's an output of whatever company you work. So I get to work very closely with them. So it's one of the things that I enjoy the most.
So I ended up in this field because, well, I studied natural resources in college, so I knew I wanted to do an environmental thing for my career. But so my wife, my then girlfriend, but now wife, had a job offer in Holyoke. So I knew we were going to be moving up here, so I was just looking for environmental jobs in the area. And I got lucky and I found this job that I have now, and it was kind of, it was kind of, I would say, in the same zip code of what I saw myself doing after college, but it wasn't like exactly what I would have described. But I've come to love it, and I think it's very exciting, and humans are always going to need energy. Everybody needs power, and I think the idea of figuring out how to do that as sustainably as possible without impacting the environment is really exciting. So every day is different, and I really love it.
Yeah, so I think that what you'll hear as a trend here is that a lot of us sort of fell sideways into the jobs that we have. And I think that that is less true for probably students like you who are going through school now, because even from when I was in school to today, it's incredible the amount of programs that you have that are sustainability and renewable energy based. Even when I was at UMass in 2014, we didn't have all that. So I think there will be a lot more students who are intending to go into energy fields and do sustainability, but for a lot of us, I don't think that groundwork had totally been laid yet. So for myself, I have a degree in planning. I absolutely 100% thought I was going to be a town planner, and I didn't have a backup plan at all. But the thing about town planners is that they get pensions and they tend to like stay in one town until they retire. So there aren't a ton of town planner positions opening up regularly. And I had a really, really hard time finding a job. So I got really lucky. I did some contract work for the town of Ware and helped them rewrite their master plan. And one of the folks who was on the steering committee owned a hydropower company. And he had seen the report writing and the research that I'd done on that committee and said, hey, if you're looking for a job when this wraps up, I think I could use your help with some stuff. So I worked with him for about a year, and I did a lot of feasibility studies. I did a lot of grant writing to get funding from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and a lot of community engagement pieces around rare species and that sort of thing. And then I had the perfect requisite of experience between municipal planning from Ware and the hydropower company to get a renewable energy consulting job at Ty & Bond. And I did that for about 4.5 years, permitting a lot of solar projects, doing a lot more feasibility studies. And then when I started looking for more work, staying in that renewable energy space was really important to me. So even as I tried to head back to the public sector, I really wanted to do something that would let me continue to work on renewable energy projects and sustainability-based projects. So this position with the Planning Commission was really appealing because my primary position is managing all of our green community grant money. So the Planning Commission oversees all of the 40 towns in Worcester County. So a lot of those have green communities money that they use to make their building stock more energy efficient and things of that nature. So I do a lot of hand holding and making sure that they're spending their money appropriately and that they are thinking about the right projects that they can do. And I think that that's really interesting work, and it's going to continue to be really interesting work for years and years and years.
Sorry, that's a great segue to asking, so you say you get your first job, and you explained how that came together through all these components that you put in place. How did you actually get that first job? I mean, looking for a job looks very different now than when I was out looking for. I would look in the paper. What did it actually look like getting your first job, and what or who helped you to know how to do that or to implement that? Would you speak to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. My job right now at Eversource is actually my second job out of college. I worked for a year in North Carolina before moving up here. But so my job at Eversource was actually just a cold application. I got really lucky, especially applying from North Carolina. But my first job out of college, I got that from a friend that I used to study with in class. So I was having a really hard time finding a job right out of school, and I just reached out to a friend who I knew in the same major, who I knew that had gotten a job, and I was like, "Is your company hiring?" And he hooked me up with an interview, and I got the job. So. I think an important thing to note in that situation is that he could have recommended, any of the dozens of students that we studied with. but he, knew that I worked hard and that I took my education seriously, and he chose to recommend me out of, some of his closer friends. So, yeah.
So, I'm a huge generation gap. I'm more in like your teachers, professors, kind of. At my time when I graduated, it was the newspapers. That was the time. Where how you looked at jobs. However, as I transitioned, because I've lived throughout the U.S., I've moved I don't know how many times because of work and jobs. It's been recruiters that has reached out to me, that had companies are looking for something or someone is specifically. Recruiters have seen my jobs, so LinkedIn, and I still get that. Most of my most recent moves has been that way. They see my resume, I keep it up to date on LinkedIn, they see it, and that's how I've been moved. That's how I got this job with First Light. I was on LinkedIn. Actually, the HR manager or director of First Light saw my resume and sent me a note, says, would you be interested in this position? They knew I was close. It was 15 minutes from my home. And I said, yeah, why not? And that's how I found this job. So for this generation, using LinkedIn smartly, not on a way of typical of social media, of your Facebook and whatever other social media exists out there that I don't know about. Make sure you keep your LinkedIn at a professional level.
Do you have like the LinkedIn Pro? Do you pay for LinkedIn?
No.
So that's not necessary.
That is not necessarily. Do not pay for LinkedIn Pro. Don't do that. That is a free service that you can use. So I don't know if there's any other systems like that. I'm more familiar with like them, and that's usually how I kept mine. But if there are resources out there similar to LinkedIn, don't hesitate. I know Indeed is a very popular one. I use Indeed when I'm recruiting for people, and it's you get a lot of stuff, but it's a good way to get a broad spectrum of candidates throughout. My advice to you folks when you're looking for jobs, make sure whatever platform you're using is you keep it professional, and be very wary of your communications and other medias. I've worked in previous companies that our HR departments will look into that. So.
It's not going to go away. Once
No,
it's
it's
posted,
not. When it's posted, it's there.
Well, I'm just going to jump ahead to a question I was going to ask you later, which is, there's lots of ways to network. Some of them are social media, some of them are in person, your example. What tips or thoughts do you have about networking? Doesn't come naturally to many of us. What do you say is the importance of networking? What did that look like, and does that look like for you? And do you have any additional advice? LinkedIn is a great piece of advice, but anything else?
I'll start with this one.
Okay, great.
So kind of in that same vein, most of the jobs that are out there aren't actually advertised. So LinkedIn is amazing, and absolutely check that open to recruiters contacting you box if you are job hunting. But my first 2 jobs that I got were not advertised anywhere. My graduate school advisor recommended me for my first one, and the second one was a guy giving me his business card after a meeting. And I never would have got those positions if I was just looking for things. They were just people that I knew that were part of my network that were really instrumental in jumpstarting my career. And that is true for a lot of positions. And going to events like this is a really good way that you can expand your network, because you are in a room with people who are interested in the same things that you're interested in, who are in the same fields that you're interested in. A tip that I like to give people is that it is really, really cheap to make yourself some business cards, even if you're just buying an Avery business card template and printing them off in your dorm room or your apartment or whatever, and that makes an impression. If you can hand a card to someone and say, I'm interested in doing an informational interview with you, or would you be willing to get coffee sometime and talk more about that point that you made? It's not a huge investment, but it's something that I think will pay off tenfold if you are a student who takes that initiative to go to a professional organization event and say, hey, I'd like to talk some more, here's my card. Even if it just says studying whatever program you're in. So I think there are ways to do it online, but I am a big proponent of in-person networking. So those are just kind of some quick tips for what to do when you go to an event and you want to maybe follow up with people afterwards.
You stole mine. I was going to mention informational interviews. When I was in college, I did that a bunch. I went to events like these, got people's business cards, sent them an email, asked to speak with them for 30 minutes, and just asked them questions about how they got where they are, what they like, advice. A lot of people want to help. I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today without a bunch of help. So a lot of people do want to help.
Yeah, and people love to talk about themselves.
Yeah,
You're not inconveniencing people if you ask for that sort of thing.
And to Sarah's other point, I think I heard a statistic that like 60% of jobs are never posted.
It's
It's
even
cra-
higher.
yeah, it's
It's like
crazy high.
85% of jobs
Yeah.
are never posted anywhere.
So that first job that I got out of school, it wasn't posted until they knew they wanted to hire me, and then I could submit an application. So that game happens a lot. So I would just say go to things like this, go to networking events, put yourself out there. Even if it makes you feel a little uncomfortable, it's definitely worth it.
I would support their points about when you come to these social events or you are attending a seminar, or even sometimes when you, for example, the Safety Council of Western New England, use that as an example. They have an annual banquet. Sometimes if you get invited to banquets like that, or you have the opportunity to attend to banquets like that, there's a lot of business going to those banquets. I was at a table, and here's where I stress a professionalism. I was at a table talking to a bunch of folks that some of them I didn't know. We were just having a conversation. The next day I get a phone call from one of the members and say, would you be interested in a position? I was not, but that was, we weren't talking. I wasn't searching for a job or anything like that. But is presenting yourself professionally and being able to put yourselves out there when you're in a table of folks that you don't know about. So the idea of the business card is awesome, especially when you're just out of school or heading to be out of school. It's a good way. But I can't stress the fact of professionalism. It plays a huge role.
Actually, can I add one more thing?
Yes.
I forgot my number one networking tip is especially if you're someone that's a little uncomfortable starting a conversation with someone that you've never met, you can see who's going to most events that you're going to go to. And if there are companies that you're interested in, do your homework and learn a little bit about them and say, oh, you work at Ty and Bond. I saw that you guys just did this really cool energy storage project in Holyoke. And then that's your in. And they're so impressed that you knew that thing. And you don't have to make awkward conversation about the weather. So that's probably my number one gold star networking tip is know who's going to be in that room and pick out a few people that you might want to talk to.
I do that before interviews too.
Yeah.
Research the people who are going to be interviewing you, see where they went to school, what they used to do.
I'm not on the panel, but I have a piece of advice as well, which is about servicing. All of us live in towns of some kind, and they all have boards that are hungry for volunteers. It's a tremendous way to participate and network, and I've been on the planning board with an engineer and a regional planner and an astronomer, and the kinds of things you learn and connect to in your service to your town. You're giving your free labor, and you're getting a lot of networking, both experience and actual context. So that's a great way, and then people are grateful for the contribution you've made.
Volunteering in general is
Yes.
actually really good also, especially when you're very early in your career. You're not necessarily getting managerial responsibilities. So if you are volunteering for something, like I do the NUI board and I coach for Girls on the Run, and those were some of my earliest leadership experiences before I had actual management titles professionally. And those people are really good references. Those are really good facets of your network where if you don't have any direct reports in your work, you can point to, oh, well, I organized this event for Big Brothers Big Sisters, and that looks really good, and that shows that you can handle a budget, that you can manage other people, even if you're not doing that in your job yet. So definitely don't write off volunteer experience.
Even though there's only 24 hours in the day, you use about 36 at this point. Would you speak, either of you, more about, any of you more about leadership? Like what opportunities to both learn and demonstrate leadership you've had? You've already started to speak to that, Sarah, and kind of how that plays a part in the work that you do.
Professionally?
Yeah, or in any aspect of your life, because it does, it does overlap. But how do you exercise that leadership muscle and then also get leadership opportunities in your work?
I would say the thing that comes to mind for me is just taking initiative. A lot of the times you might not be taking initiative and taking ownership. A lot of the times early in your career it might not be the most exciting tasks you're given, but I think taking ownership and no matter what you are given, making sure that you excel at it and it's a really high quality product that you can stand on and be proud of, even if it's just, combine these two spreadsheets, which I've done before, but making sure that it's very effective and you do a good job. I think that people notice that. And another thing is just looking out for experiences that you want to do. I approached my boss and said I want to, pursue a part-time graduate program. What are your thoughts on this? And just other things that you can do to further your education that, nobody pitched to you, but you want to do.
So I'll use the term leadership a little bit more broad, from the standpoint of when you look at, similar to what was being mentioned, you're doing a project. It's a group. And a lot of times you end up in projects with several departments, making yourself heard during those projects, events, making sure what you're saying you're backing it up with data. You're backing it up with research. That's some of the leadership skills that will come out during projects, events, and then managers, supervisors notice that. You don't necessarily have to have a manager's title to be a leader also. It's how you carry yourself on those meetings, sure of the information you are providing. I've had not sure fortune or not, of every company I worked at, usually I'm the only female or one of the very few females. I worked in manufacturing all my career. I think the only time that I had a good group of population of females is when I worked for one of my previous employers at their corporate office in Ohio. It was big, so I could do that, but at the plant levels, usually very little. That's where your leadership has to come out, and that's when I meant I'm using the term a lot broader, that self-assurance that you are correct on what you're presenting and that your stuff, so especially if you don't know where you end up, but if you end up in manufacturing, working, or working closely with the folks at the maintenance personnel on a utility company or the electrician or something like that, you have to be very sure when you're presenting your topics to them and having your discussions with them. That's the leadership that you need to present. So it's from a little bit of a different angle.
So you're painting a picture that makes me think of another question, which is, have you encountered barriers in your progression in your careers that you could share, and how you surmounted those barriers, whether it be related to being a woman in those fields or other barriers that can happen?
I'll start with this one, I guess. I think I've been very, very fortunate from the perspective as someone who has been very much in a minority as a female, and a lot of the positions that I had when I was at the hydropower company, I was the only woman. Mm-hmm. And at Ty & Bond, which is primarily an engineering firm, I think we would be lucky to be able to say that we were 30% female. I think it was probably less than that. But I have also been in the unique position where I was sort of a specialty expert that a lot of people relied upon. Being a planner and a permitting expert at an engineering firm, I had a skill set that not everyone there had. And the same at the hydropower company, I was the only person that was doing a lot of the grant writing and the more administrative pieces, and everyone else was sort of out in the plants maintaining the turbines and that sort of work. So I think that I have been able to leverage that sort of position and say, you know what, I might not have the most experience here. There might be a lot of men in this room who would mansplain to me, but they don't know anything about permitting, and they know that. And I do think that I've also been incredibly fortunate to have male managers that were very supportive. My senior vice president at Ty & Bond was the one that got me involved with NUI, and I don't think that I would have had a lot of the opportunities that I've had if it weren't for him. So I think that there are a lot of men who really want to see the gender balance out more in these fields, and I have been lucky to have encountered them thus far. So I think definitely know your stuff, and people aren't going to care if you're a young woman versus a very experienced man, if you are the person with the answers.
It's funny that this is coming up. I was at a happy hour before this with my coworker, and I told him I was going to this tonight, and I told him that I was involved with NUI, New England Women in Energy and the Environment, and he said, we were at a table, it was me and like 6 guys, and he was like, oh, do they have one of those for men? Because I would go to it. And I said, yeah, it's called Eversource.
It's called General.
Yeah. So for me, it's kind of been a double whammy in that Eversource has about 7% of their employees are under the age of 30. So I walk around and I'm 25, but I know I look like I'm like 18. So I still get asked if I'm the intern. And so that's been a challenge in that, you know, sitting in a room and I'm the youngest person by 20 years and I'm the only woman. So I think a big thing that Sarah touched on is confidence. Just knowing that you're supposed to be there, you have the right education to be there, you have the right experiences to be there. You earned your seat at that table just like everybody else, maybe more than everybody else. So confidence, I just try to remind myself that I'm supposed to be here and I earned being here.
Kind of hard to add more, but I would agree. You have to be confident, but confidence with humility also, being humble. All right, and don't take this wrong. We cannot go in there with a chip on our shoulders. All right, they've been in there a lot longer than we have. Therefore, sometimes they feel like they know better. So being confident with humility and willing to listen to their point, to be prepared to say you're wrong and here's the reason why, you know, with confidence and humility goes a long way. You know, I come from an immigrant family. And the best advice my dad gave to me when I started engineering, you know, he said to me, if you always smile, you take away that barrier as a woman in front of a bunch of men. You know, because you're gonna feel that they're more approachable. So it's not necessarily that you're gonna be with a smile at all the times, but you bring in that I'm approachable, I can have a conversation with you, that openness. And it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Well, I could ask more questions, but I want to open it up for your questions or comments or follow-ups, because it's your careers and futures that we're here to think about.
I feel like you've answered many of the questions that I came in about, like life after school. So I guess I'd ask, are there any little suggestions or nuggets of wisdom of like, I wish when I was in school that I had blank, or any lesson you learned the hard way of something, you know, while we're still in this? Any suggestions or things maybe you would have taken more advantage of or something?
I think I would enjoy more school. You know, engineering is tough, and I dedicated my focus to my 4 years of engineering. So I look back, I have a 20-year-old daughter that is in college, and I say to her, you know, focus on school and stuff like that, but enjoy your time being young too. You know, it's important learning that balance, you know, of here's my future, but I still can enjoy my time, you know, so learn that balance, because you're gonna have to play it for the rest of your life.
I would say that post-grad was a pretty big transition, especially since I moved all the way from North Carolina up here, and going from, you know, all your best friends living within a half mile to being all spread out the country was a really big transition that I don't think I was mentally prepared for. So know that your life is going to take a really big transition, and be prepared for how you're going to, I guess, build relationships, make new friendships in a different area if you do move. That was the biggest thing for me.
I think definitely take classes outside of what you think you're interested in right now. I was a chemistry major on a pre-med track when I started at UMass, and I only got into planning because I took a city planning course as a general education, just kind of like checking a box, and it really clicked with me, and I was really fortunate that the professor of that class was like, I noticed you're a chem major, are you sure? So I think definitely widen what you think you might. If you think something sounds interesting, take the class. If you have gen eds to satisfy, absolutely, like take some weird classes, because you never know what is really going to make sense to you. I think also don't stress so much about how well it looks like everyone is doing. I think especially now with the way things are in social media, you think that no one is failing, but everyone is failing. And I think that it's really important to talk about that with your friends when things aren't going great either. When I graduated with my master's degree, when I was at the town of Ware, I was working at the mall at a jewelry store also. And when I was at the Hydro Company, I was also working at a Boston locker room and at a Planet Fitness, and didn't really have like health insurance or anything super full time. And I was like, oh no, I can't let anyone know that this is what I paid so much money to go to graduate school for. But I think that that's really important, because that's the reality for so many people, and you are not in the minority for that sort of thing. People just don't talk about it. So don't be so hard on yourself if it doesn't happen the way you think it's going to right away.
Kind of on a similar note, any tips on choosing a master's program, or like at what point is it a good idea to get a master's? I'm kind of like, I've got a job, but I want a better job. I don't know if I should go for my master's or not, or if I even need to. I don't know.
Maybe a different perspective. I would advise you graduate, look for a job, try to find an established position that you feel comfortable in. If you like the company, negotiate with the company to pay for your master's or your doctorate.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. If you are working currently and you can get someone to pay for it, get your master's. But we so NUI also has a rising professionals group that I chair, and we just hosted a graduate school panel, and I think I learned a lot from it, even as someone who had attended graduate school. But the things that I really took away from it were the big things that you get from graduate school are you get like a skill set, a really specialized skill set. You get a network, and it hopefully opens up more career prospects for you. So if you can get those things without paying a ton of money or going further into debt, maybe you don't need a master's degree. But if you think that that is your stepping stone to the next step in your career, or if you think that's the way that you're really going to expand your network through those professors and those research opportunities, then that is probably a good way to go. And there is definitely a trend right now where I think a lot of firms are up credentialing, so I think that that is something to keep an eye on. If you know that there is a specific field that you really want to be in, and you're noticing that they're only hiring people with MBAs or with doctorates or whatever it may be, then maybe that's what you have to do to get that job. But I don't think that that's true for everything in the industry, and it's definitely not something that you should do on a whim because it's hard and it's expensive.
Of course.
I definitely agree with both of these women. Like I mentioned, I just started a graduate program online part-time through UConn, and I can tell you right now, if Eversource wasn't paying for it, I wouldn't do it. It is not worth going into debt, in my opinion, in my experience. I think that I don't think I need it. I don't think I need to do it, but for me, it goes back to that confidence, and that formal education gives me confidence, and being able to say that I studied all of these things, I took all of these courses in environmental policy and sustainability and GIS, that just gives me another thing to stand on.
The other way you can also look at it is that you don't necessarily have to go post-grad, after your 4 years. There's other ways to increase your knowledge, all right, you can take university courses and put it on your resume that you took this because this is what you learned. There is a lot of seminars out there that you can take. So you need to, after you have that first stepping stone, you need to plan how you want to increase your education, and why is the purpose of you increasing your education. What is it that you want out of it before you make that decision. And if you do want to go to that route, have the company pay for it or negotiate something with the company. It's too expensive today.
Yeah. If I might pipe in too, and again, I was in grad school a long time ago, but many STEM grad programs do actually pay you to go. So you can get fellowships or TA-ships, and you get a tuition waiver. And it's not like that necessarily is living high on the hog, but you can survive and work part-time, or I didn't even have to work in graduate school. So it depends what field you're into, that you can sometimes have graduate schools that you don't have to get someone else to pay for because the university is able to do that. Other questions?
I guess this question really, it's private sector versus public sector. Which one?
Somebody just moved from private to public.
Oh, okay. Is it easier to get your foot in the door with either? Is it more enjoyable to work with either? Like more satisfying? I guess I feel like I'd rather be in public sector because I have this worry that like private sector is like up to no good. But I know that that's not necessarily true, and you can do good work in both. So, yeah.
I was hoping that someone would ask this question. So I, like you, felt very much the same way when I graduated. I thought public sector or bust. I don't want to go private with my planning degree, because I felt the same way. And I think that there is a misconception that consultants are all kind of sleazy and don't have good intentions. And what I have learned over the last 6 or so years since I graduated is that there are a lot of very true and very untrue stereotypes about both public and private sector work. So I guess I'll do the quick pros and cons that I've experienced of both sides of things. I'm not sure that it's easier to get a job in one or the other. It really depends on what your skill set is, and they do kind of tend to flip-flop. When it's easy to get hired in private, it tends to be a little bit harder in public. I'm not totally sure why that is, but something about who has the money, if it's the private folks or if the state is really dishing out good money for munis, I guess. But when I was a consultant, I did work 60-hour weeks. I had people calling me on Christmas Eve. I had people calling me on New Year's. If it was a holiday weekend, I would go into work on Tuesday and have 65 emails from Monday because people expect you to be working 24/7. And it's because they're paying you a lot of money to be at their beck and call. And I think that people think that there are a lot of perks that go with that, and there certainly are. In a lot of instances, the pay is better. In a lot of instances, there's a wider variety of projects. I definitely could have worked on a really vast array of things when I was at the consulting firm. But I will say, even in the 3 weeks that I've been back in the public sector, thinking like, oh, I don't get to use all of their printer paper anymore, and they're not going to pay for me to go to conferences. They're sending me to LA for a Brownfields conference. They never did that for me when I worked private. So I think that there are definitely some, oh, you don't make a lot of money if you work in the public sector. Not true. I'm getting paid more now than I did when I was in public, and they're sending me to some really cool events. I do think that I will probably be a bit more constrained in the types of projects that I'm working on, but I'm really lucky that I found a public sector job that's really well aligned with my interests. So I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. And I have heard from a lot of people that the staying power, the job security is a little bit better public sector. That hasn't necessarily been my personal experience, but I think that that is a general consideration, is that your job security is a bit better if you have a public job versus a private job. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of been my rundown.
So let me expand to that. I've had the experience to work in public sector and private sector, and I also make a distinction in private sector. I was consulting versus working on a company that is hiring a consultant. So I've done all three. To me, a job is a job. Doesn't matter. You know, the expectations that you have, that a manager is going to have of you, is the same. They want you to perform. Do you work more hours versus the other ones? To my experience, it depends on who you are, you know, and what is the expectation of the position. You know, are there benefits? There's, you know, financial, it depends. When I worked in the public sector, it was out in California. The benefits were awesome. You know, the salary wasn't, but the benefits from the standpoint of retirement, I got out 100% right away, invested. You don't see that. You know, you gotta wait 3-6 months and stuff like that in a private. So it all depends on who you're working for, what is the package they're gonna provide. But from what is easier, are they evil or something like that, a job is a job. You know, you have to look at it from that perspective. It is up to you to decide on your ethics. This is being asked of you, of taking certain decisions, you know.
I just want to say that when I was in college, I was like, I'm only going to work for the Nature Conservancy, the Sierra Club, the EPA, and then circumstances changed. I decided I wanted to follow a girl to Western Massachusetts, and this is how I, you know, this is where I found a job. And I would have thought that, you know, everybody thinks that Eversource is the big bad utility company, and, you know, but we just want to follow the rules. We want to give everybody power, and we want to work towards a sustainable future. So don't discount the big evil corporations.
I have to say, Eversource has been my provider for a while, and I love you guys. I don't have a problem with Eversource.
And I'd like to add to that if I could. I work in the private sector now for a sustainable seafood company, and I got really lucky finding that job that aligned perfectly with where my goals were, and I've worked for the state as well. And the companies are out there. You just have to dig really deep to find them. I had no idea this place existed, but luckily one of the job recruiters I was working with knew of this company and kind of connected us both, and got really lucky with that.
So you were working with a job recruiter working for you, or a recruiter who found you?
No, recruiter that found me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Sorry.
To add to that, know that you can actually work with recruiters too. All right? It's not necessarily a recruiter is going to find you. It goes both ways. I've done it both ways. When I wanted to move or something like that, I just reach out to a recruiter.
Yeah.
Here's my resume.
Yeah.
And
How do you
most
find
of
them? How do you find a recruiter? Someone goes, I want to do that tomorrow. How would they find a
so
recruiter?
you gotta love Google.
Yeah.
For starters. I love technology today. But you do your search and you look for the specialties. In my field, I've always looked at for folks that are recruiters for EHS, and there's specialties on that. So I'm sure for those folks that are in planning or in other fields, there are. My husband, I'll say the same thing. He's used the same situation, and he's an operations guy. So he's used recruiters that are focused on operations and manufacturing and stuff like that. So know that you can also look for jobs using recruiters. All right.
Can I add something? So I know I'm in a STEM career, but I'm not in energy and the environment, but I find that my connections from college are really helpful, and social media. I think part of the only reason I still have Facebook is because I belong to a lot of different college related Facebook groups. For this event, I don't know if people came here from putting it out on the Seven Sisters Facebook group and Mount Holyoke hiring Facebook group, but there are these hiring groups where people just post up jobs, and then there are themed ones. There are themed people working in nonprofit consultation. My little brother is a drug company consultant, and he has gotten every job he's ever had by looking up people who went to the same college as him on LinkedIn and cold calling them. And when he moved to San Francisco, he did that with 15 or 20 different people that he didn't know, and of all different ages. So I think your college and university connections are really helpful too.
If people wanted to become part of New Eve, how would they do that?
You can definitely come talk to me afterwards if you think you're interested. But we have a really great website that got revamped as part of our rebranding for our 10-year anniversary last year. So it's pretty easy to find membership information on there, and you can register through the website. For those of you who checked that you wanted to opt into the newsletter, I'll get you added to that, and you'll get updates once or twice a month, depending on what blast we're doing. But we do offer 50% discounts on student memberships, and also if the college wanted to become an organizational member, we would offer a 50% discount on that as well. So it would be $50 for a student membership. But a lot of our events are free. We have a Western New England chapter. We also have the Rising Professionals group. And we try, for the Western New England chapter, most of our events are in Connecticut or Western Mass, so I would keep an eye out for those events. You normally don't have to be a member, and you don't have to pay to go to those. And the Rising Professionals events move around throughout the region. So some of them are in Massachusetts, some are in New Hampshire, some are in Connecticut, they're all over the place. But yeah, most of those are free and open to whoever wants to come.
And very interesting, the newest in battery storage was one, current things in these fields that might be of interest, and people who go to those are going to be people you want to meet.
Yeah, and another piece of advice that I'll throw out there, a lot of people have touched on looking up people that were in the same program as you on LinkedIn and that sort of thing. I encourage everyone to kind of figure out who your work crush is, figure out who has the job that you want to have in 15 or 20 years, and look at how they got there. And I have met all of my work crushes through NUE. The women that are a part of this organization are so incredible, and I have learned so much from them since I got involved. So definitely, if you can ever come to a Western New England event, I would encourage you to do it. There's a lot of really cool stories about how these ladies got into the field and how they have made it to the positions that they're in. And they are so generous with their time and their expertise. So I would really hope to see some of you guys at one of our next events.
We'll get them posted through various
Oh,
venues.
good.
Maybe any other questions? I'm going to time for sort of informal networking. No? My last question to you is, who is one key person you think about, how you got here? Does somebody sort of come to mind who really was key in that process? Who really sort of stood for you and you needed it, or helped with it at a particular moment, or had a vision for you that helped get you here?
I can go. You guys want a few minutes? So I have been in Eversource. I've actually only been an Eversource employee since June, and before that I was a contractor, still reporting directly to Eversource, but through another company. And there was this transitional period when Eversource kind of hinted at wanting to offer me a job, and it was really awkward, and it took 6 months to figure out, and the current company knew I was talking to Eversource, and what really stands out to me about this period in terms of someone I looked up to is that I had a mentor through Women in Communication and Energy, and she was so generous with her time. We talked every week, and I was like, this is what's going on, this is what they know, I think they're going to offer me this, and she talked through everything with me, and I could not have gotten through that time without her. And we never even met in person. She lives in New York, but she was so generous, and I got an amazing job offer, and I think it was really because of her help.
It was honestly probably that professor that pulled me aside in city planning, because I would not have changed majors. I would be doing who knows what. I don't even know what you do with a chemistry degree. But I was very, very fortunate that his name is Mark Hammond. He's at UMass. He's great. If any of you,
We're going this weekend to his open house.
oh yeah, oh for the planning for the design building. Yes,
That's the program I'd like to go into.
I cannot recommend that program more highly. But yeah, Mark Hammond is probably still one of my heroes. I am in contact with him like almost constantly. I was emailing him like yesterday. But he got me into the planning field. He saw that it was something that I had a knack for, and really just nourished that interest in it. And I was one of the first students to go through the accelerated master's program. So I stayed on for 1 extra year at UMass and got my master's degree. So I was a little bit of a guinea pig for him, I think. But so I think there's mutual gratefulness there. But yeah, he's been great for anything. Every time I need a reference or anything, he is right there with it. So I think the people that you're at school with right now, we cannot stress enough how important they are to your network, your peers and your professors and your advisors. They could be lifelong resources for you. So definitely make those connections while you're in school, because they will probably continue to be really important.
So that's actually a tough question for me. So I think if I look back when I was in your shoes, I think it was one of the professors that I had in the chemical engineering department. His name is Professor Westmoreland. He was my senior lab teacher, and I think he gave me the best advice that I don't think he realized he was giving me. He told me 2 things. One, if you truly want to be an engineer, go get your PhD. Otherwise, we are teaching you to think, you know. And I think that's the best advice that he could have given me, because it really was the 4 years that taught me. It taught me how to think, you know. And if you think about the process you're going through and you look back when you started, hopefully you learned how to think, how to process things, how to take projects, how to break them down, how to manage your time. So it was one of the best advices he gave me. The other advice he gave me is learn business. Take classes in business. Understand the business. You know, because the reality is you may be going into a certain field, but the world is run by money. So you need to understand how companies, public or private, are making money. You know, because that's how we survive. So those are the 2 things that I think back when Professor Westmoreland sat me down and say, here's some words of wisdom he didn't think he was giving me, but thinking back.
The business department is very grateful that you gave them. So any last questions? And we'll just take some time to get some more food, drink, talk. Thank you all very, very much for your generosity, paying it forward for what people gave to you and giving it to us.